Hello everyone. I hope you can hear and see me. Sorry for the time that I've taken. Um, okay, so I'll just wait for one person to confirm you can hear and see me, and then we will get started. Okay, are we connected? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay, just confirming. Okay, just waiting. Once I get one confirmation, then we are good to go. Hello, can you hear and see me? Please confirm. Okay, thank you. One person has confirmed we are good to go. Just pasting this here, making sure the others are connected, and then we'll get started. Thank you very much for joining us, Sarah. Okay, so we are live. And if you are joining us for the first time, please let us know where you are joining from. And thank you for your patience. I know there was some delay in starting off, we had to reconnect. But you're welcome. It's going to be very interesting and it promises to be exciting as usual. So many lessons to share. And in preparing for this, of course, I also get my own insights, which I find really good, really beneficial because I'm learning also in the process. So we're going to get started. Today we're talking about what is so special about Montessori, right? I categorize it as 5 W's and 1 H, which is something that is common in manufacturing and really in some other workplaces. It's always good, whatever we learn outside, wherever we are, in school, at work, we make sure we bring it back home, right? Make good use of it in our homes and in everything that we're doing. So we're going to be looking at Montessori from that aspect, the what of Montessori, the how, the why, when, and where. How do you implement it? Where can you implement it? What is it really all about, right? And then based on that understanding, we'll be able to get started with doing certain things even from today, right? So for those that are here, what can you say is your understanding of what Montessori is? I'd like to see one comment. What is it really? How would you define it if someone should ask you what is Montessori? I'm curious to hear our thoughts on that. So just put that in the chat, put that in the comment if you're watching later on. And let's see how that goes. What do you understand as Montessori? Okay, so I'll just give a few seconds for that. Is it a method of education? Is it a method of, being at home? What exactly does it really imply to you based on how you understand it? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share what Montessori really is all about, right? And some of the benefits, of course, we can get by understanding it and by implementing it. Just give me 1 second, please. Okay, we're good. So Montessori is a method of education. That in fact it can be many things to different people, right? So one of the first ways to see it is as a method of education. How children are taught in school, a curriculum, which you can apply whether at home if you're homeschooling, or you can apply it in the school environment, right? So it can be a method of education It can also be seen as a way of raising children, right? How do you apply Montessori at home to bring up children, to train your children in the house, in the environment, wherever they are? And it was also a method that was developed by Dr. Maria Montessori. Before I go further into Dr. Maria Montessori, I'll also give a little bit of briefing on myself. So my name is Nkem Sinachi Agu, and I'm the founder of the Montessori Home Education Academy. I run the Montessori Home Education Program, which is a program for parents of 0 to 6 year olds to be able to bring Montessori home and support their children, whether they are in a homeschool environment or if they are going to mainstream schools, right? So we are talking about the first W of Montessori. What is it really all about? And I was just saying how it can be used in a school as a curriculum. It can also be used at home. But another thing to really understand is that the Montessori itself is actually someone's name. Dr. Maria Montessori, who was a medical doctor that kind of rolled out this method. She started off as a medical doctor, and then during her practice, she had to work, in a psychiatric space and also work with children who had special needs to be able to help with supporting them. And in the process of that, she realized that the children were not necessarily being engaged with other things beyond trying to treat them of the different challenges that they were having. And so she began to develop materials for them based on some of the things she had also built from her mentors. And from then on, she also had further experience to now work with children who were not necessarily having any special needs or challenges, but they were from poor homes, right, or poor families. And but because of this, they were just in a particular building, and she was more or less hired to keep the children, more like take care of the children or watch them, just so that they wouldn't cause havoc or destroy things because they were idle, right? So in the process of working with them, she realized that some of the materials and methods she was using with children who had one special need or the other was also working with these children who the only thing that was sort of lacking was um, not having resources, and they were from poor families. And then ultimately, the method was then spread out to all children because it was now seen that this wasn't something that was beneficial to just people children who had one need or the other. It wasn't just beneficial to those in poor homes or in rich homes, but to everybody. And then ultimately, it became a widespread method and a mainstream method. Right, so there's so much more detail, of course, in the history of the Montessori development, but this is kind of a summary of how it all started from a medical doctor's perspective to someone who now turned a real educator, a mainstream educator. So that's really about the what of Montessori. If you're just joining us, please share with us where you are joining from and what you understand as Montessori. When you hear it, if you're hearing it for the first time or if you've heard it many times, what have you been able to deduce that this is even what it's all about, right? So share that in the comments. I look forward to seeing it or in the chats as well. So we're going to be going to the second W, which is why. So why should you even be bothered about Montessori as a whole? Why is it important? What's all this talk about Montessori? Some of us, of course, you might have seen the flyer for the program that I run once a year, and we've talked about the upcoming Montessori home education program for 2025. We're going to do this and that, and some people might just be wondering, what is it all about? Do I need this at all, right? Meanwhile, on the other hand, some of us may have found ourselves already trying to get lesson teachers for our children because we feel they are struggling in one aspect or the other, right? So ultimately, the goal, why we want to practice Montessori at home, why we want to even learn about it, is really so that we can understand what children 0 to 6 years old will be able to, are capable of doing, because sometimes we don't even know that they are capable of doing so much, right? So being able to learn about it is very key, and then you can now translate it into how it will work in your own house and how it will work for your own children. One of the things that Dr. Maria Montessori was fond of saying is how education and peace go hand in hand, right? When a child is properly educated in the real sense of the word education, and not just trying to cram and pour some knowledge or some information somewhere, right? The child is actually going to become peaceful and also become an advocate of peace. And another thing she was commonly known for saying is that children are citizens of the world. When we talk about language, for instance, when a child is born, they are capable of learning any language, right? So wherever they are born, it's not like it's genetically programmed in them that, okay, this is the language they must speak. If a child is born in a different country from their country of origin, they're going to speak the language of that country where they are born. They are not going to automatically know how to speak maybe their original based on their ancestry and all that. They're not going to automatically know it. It's based on yeah. Welcome, madam. Welcome. Thank you for joining us, Madam Diane. Thank you, Sarah. um, Very good, very good. Please share what your understanding of Montessori is. I'm curious to see that. So one of the things Dr. Maria Montessori was saying, welcome, Judith, welcome. So what she was saying is that really children are citizens of the world, and most of the time, all these biases that come up is really from what we tell children, how we expose them, and some of the ideas that they begin to pick up from us that are as adults, right? So ultimately, education should serve as a help to life. That's one of the Montessori quotes. Education should not just be for grades or whatever it is, but it should be for the purpose of learning, for the purpose of being useful to ourselves in life, useful to the environment, useful to our communities. If we are getting educated and we can't apply anything that we are learning to make our own lives better, to make the lives of those around us better, then we are not really getting educated. There's also another quote. I don't have the exact words of really, but it says that it's also Dr. Maria Montessori quote, where she said that education should no longer be about just passing knowledge or imparting knowledge, but really it's about extracting, the potential from the child. So ultimately, when we say why should we be concerned about Montessori, because it is one of the educational approaches that focuses on the child and focuses on bringing out that talent that they have. Exactly, Judith. The Montessori allows kids to learn at their pace using things around them. Very, very key. Now, the things we're going to still talk about, the how of Montessori or the where. What are these things that we need to be able to practice Montessori? Sometimes people might get a little bit discouraged with the fact that, oh, Montessori materials, they're just flashy or fancy, very expensive materials. I'm not even ready to start dealing with it and thinking of how I cannot afford that and all those details. Meanwhile, Montessori is not about the materials. Of course, the materials were developed to be able to address the needs of children and make things as hands-on as possible. But what does that mean? It means you also, with the right understanding, can make your own hands-on materials to address specific needs, and you can tailor it to the needs of your child. So ultimately, why Montessori is to be able to work with the child that we have and not the one that we try to have, according to Coach Wendy Ologe, a parenting expert. It's not you parent the child that you have and not the one that you want to have. You educate the child that you have, not the one that you want to have. You educate based on the talents that the child has. You're not educating based on the one that you wish they would have, right? So that is one advantage that parents have, because you can see your child, you know their strengths, you know their weaknesses, and you can choose to focus on their strengths rather than their weaknesses. So Montessori is one method that really helps you to be in tune with your children and educate them according to what they already have. Now, the third W is who. So someone might say, who is Montessori for? And I think the answer I'll say is that it's for everyone. And why do I say this? Although I'm a certified Montessori educator for parents of 0 to 3 and 3 to 6 year olds. However, in my study of Montessori and all that I've been learning, I'm beginning to see that really it's for everybody, because Montessori, after a while, in fact, when I was talking about the what of Montessori, after a while you realize it's like a culture, because you even have some people that identify themselves as, oh, we are Montessorians, because it's something that you practice beyond just teaching math or teaching English or teaching whatever subject it is. When you learn the principles, for example, of respecting the child, you realize that even the adult needs to be respected, right? Sometimes we say, oh, don't talk to me like a child. Meanwhile, that is just showing you that, okay, children are being disrespected. Children need to be talked to normally as well. They can understand us. And even when they cannot understand us, they pick our language when we speak to them normally, right? So it's very key to understand that Montessori applies to everybody. It's now about how you understand it and how you want to implement it. So I'm going to walk through some of the age groups, that you can typically find in the Montessori environment and how it applies to them, so that you'll be able to see why I say Montessori is for everyone. And of course, even though I have the program that runs for 0 to 3 and 3 to 6 year olds, as parents of children with those age ranges, you find that even the parents themselves begin to learn things that they can apply for their own selves. I'm going to come to that a little later on. So let's say, in terms of who, as the third W, Montessori is for Hi, Joy, Dr. Joy, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So, talking about children now, the first group of people that you say Montessori is for, we have the 0 to 3 year olds. And the 0 to 3 year olds are those who Dr. Montessori described as being in the unconscious, in the period of the unconscious absorbent mind, which means they pick everything in their environment, they absorb it into their minds, whether they like it or not. If you play a particular series of songs or music to the child, they are absorbing it, right? They are getting used to those kind of songs. Oh, sorry about that. Don't worry, you haven't missed so much. You can just catch the replay once you join in. That's okay. So we're talking about the 5 W's and 1 H of Montessori, and we've spoken about what is Montessori, why Montessori, and now we're talking about who. So we're just on the third W. So for children of 0 to 3 years, we have the unconscious absorbent mind where they can pick whatever they see in their environment, whatever they hear in their environment, whatever they get to do at that age. And then from 3 to 6, you have the conscious absorbent mind. So the conscious absorbent mind means that the child now begins to pick the things they want to learn based on their interests, and they're able to pick these things fast. As long as the environment is prepared in a way that is attractive for them and suits their interests, right? So if you see that your child is interested in arts and music, then you begin to feel they like to play with the spoon in particular, you start getting creative as a parent. Oh, how can I turn this into an activity? How can I expand this interest into something that is big or something that is bigger, right? So that's 3 to 6. Then we have the 6 to 9. When the child starts getting more interested in working with others. From 0 to 6, of course, they are kind of working on their own or working alongside others. From 6 to 9, they start getting interested in working with others. So Montessori is for this group as well. We also have from 9 to 12 when they start having accelerated intellectual growth, right? The rate at which they can pick things and the kind of things, the complexity of things that they understand also begins to increase. And from 12 to 18, you see them start being interested in group projects and all sorts of things. They also have rapid physical growth at that age. So at these different ages, you're seeing that there are so many ways. There's the curriculum you can implement with them and how you can apply it to them. And even for 18 to 24, that's the your typical university age, they begin to also see that they can choose a particular subject area and go further into it to be able to make a difference in their world, right? To impact their world. Before I go into adults and how Montessori can be used for adults, I wanted to just share something. So, when I say who is Montessori meant for, it's very, as much as it applies to a lot of the ages, it's so key for those in the age range of 0 to 6. This is because of course, as we are learning, we realize or we know that from 0 to 3, about 90 something percent of the brain is being developed at that age, which means whatever foundation you learn, 0 to 3 and even 3 to 6, whatever foundation you lay for the child is what they are going to build on, right? So whatever you feed them in that period is what is going to expand. They are going to multiply it, in fact, several fold, right? 100-fold, whatever it is you call it. But then this also, while this works in their favor, it means that there are some negative things that can also work as a disadvantage. So I'll give the example of screen time. So for sometimes, someone might say, oh, well, maybe I grew up watching TV or something like that. But the truth is that while you might think you grew up watching TV, you may not realize that you are probably not watching it at 0 to 3, depending on the situation or depending on what was going on, right? Or even 3 to 6. For you to even remember watching TV, you may have already been above that age, right? So nowadays, it's hard to really say, oh, I did all this, it was fine, nothing happened. You can't just really be dismissive in something like that because at that age, imagine the way I compare it is that if, for example, 0 to 3, the brain is forming, and you're putting a lot of good things in the mind of the child, in the environment of the child, and they can multiply those good things. If you now make some what I'll describe as wrong choices, or for example, instead of developing their fine motor skills, gross motor skills, instead of doing that, they are now sitting in front of a screen, and the part of their brain that should be developing and based on those activities they should have been doing, playing outside, playing inside, and then now they're just sitting and watching a screen, not even be discovered until a much later age. The research that I did, I think I had shared it on one of our communities, how from 0 to 1 year, of course, no screen at all is advisable. 0 to 2, sorry. And then what it even says, even from 2 years, where most of us say, oh, from 2, they can now watch everything, they can watch for 1 hour. It still says that the percentage of the impact, the damage to the brain or the consequences of having those screens for a long time, most of the time the impact tends to show several years later. Sometimes it can be, if it was two at the age of 1, 2, or 3, they were just binge watching TV or screens or whatever it is, for whether it's 1 hour, how many hours, I don't know, right? But impact may not show until maybe they are 4 or 5 or 6, right? So if you're now gambling with the fact that, oh, you just need to put them there for some time, it's okay, nothing would spoil, you may not even realize the impact until much later. So just the same way, at that age, when you're loading them up with all the interesting materials, they're learning about the environment around them, they're learning the names of things. And then when they get a little older, they start getting more interested and drilling into those details they learned when they were small. It's also the same way, like if you have a little scar, right? And then as you're growing bigger, the scar can also start getting bigger, right? So the impact of some of the things that we do, whether good or bad, doesn't always show immediately, which is why even when we're implementing certain things, don't just get carried away with, oh, I'm not seeing results immediately. It will show, right? And the same way, when you think what you're doing doesn't matter or it's not really bad, it will still show, right? So I just wanted to point that out, that why it is critical for 0 to 6 for us to pay attention and make sure we are feeding them with the right things that they need to develop according to their age group. So, still on the third W, feel free if you have any question, put it in the chat. But we're still on the third W. Who is Montessori for? So we've talked about children up to the age of, from 0 to up to 24. Now, going into adults, which is 18 and still above, right? So I'll share the example of how my training went, during my Montessori training. So I completed it at the North American Montessori Center. I highly recommend it. One of the things I learned, because I didn't go to a Montessori school myself, right, growing up. But one of the things I learned from that program was, I felt, as I was learning about Montessori, I felt like I was actually in a Montessori school myself, because the way the program was structured, it wasn't about grades or, oh, you're trying to finish this to get this grade, or get a particular mark or a particular score. It was focused on learning, right? So basically, during the program, I had materials that I could access. I had videos, I had a curriculum to work with. I also had access to my tutor, right? So whenever, as I was reading, as I was trying to complete some projects here and there, I was able to, as the questions come, I could just send it into my tutor and she would respond like, oh, based on this. Now, somebody else might say, oh, I want to go to a class and they're teaching me from this hour to this hour, covering these subjects. But the truth is that most of the time, you find out that even when you're learning in school, higher education, whatever it is, you might not be picking everything that is being taught to you. So is it not better that you even have access to the different thing, maybe just a few? You can still have a few live sessions here and there, but ultimately it is the one that piques your interest that you're going to drill further into, right? It is in the process of completing your assignments, and these assignments are not, no, it's not what you want to start copying from somebody else, because that is not the goal. There's no benefit, there's no grade you're looking for. You're trying to learn, and by the time you finish the process, if you have any questions, you see yourself reaching out to the tutor, and then they can explain based on your own particular point of need. And it just makes you realize that even for children, right, when we are teaching them, yes, we have that overall guideline, we have that overall scope of what we think they should learn, but ultimately when you're working with the specific child that you have, you know or that you're teaching, whether it's in a classroom or in your home, you can now tailor it and say, okay, ultimately this month I want the child to learn about numbers, or I want the child to learn about letters. How they go about it is a different thing altogether, right? So that was one thing I saw during my own program that made me realize that even adults, if we understand how this method works, it means that we can apply it to our own education. If you're doing adult education, if you're completing a program, whether it's your master's, your undergraduate, you'll see that if you begin to focus more on the learning rather than on the grades will come, kind of like the good grades will come by default, right? Because you're focusing on learning, and ultimately, even if you have an exam or a test, it's usually spread out across. Nobody just asks you on one topic out of the 100 that you've learned, right? So it's spread out across a series of topics. And when you know that the goal of education is really to be able to help your life, to help other people's lives, your whole mindset changes, right? So as adults, we can even learn how to apply Montessori to our own lives, to our own education, and not just our children, right? And then most recently, I started seeing also Montessori for the elderly. So that one really caught my interest, because I was like, wow, this is that even if Whether you're aging, whether you feel you're already retired and all that, there is still a lot for you to do um, in terms of understanding Montessori. Because when you choose to learn something, for instance, when you choose to make an impact in your community, it is by the things that you're learning, it's by the things you're able to offer, the value you're able to bring, right? Even some simple cognitive activities that the children do, working with physical materials. Sometimes when the children are working with materials, maybe they're just putting beads together. Of course, ultimately, after putting the beads together, you can tie it up and they can put it on their neck like a necklace. Of course, most times after 1 or 2 days, they can't even find the necklace anymore, right? But they've enjoyed the process of stringing those beads together. Now, even the elderly, it's kind of like a cycle of life, right? Even the elderly, um, while they might be retired or finished, so in quotes, right, the work that they have been doing for a long time, there's still a lot of work that can be done. And one of the focuses I was seeing was, okay, the elderly that might have one health challenge or the other, the focus now goes away from just trying to care for them, but also as checking what is it that they can still do for themselves, and then using that to be able to give them value, give them a new perspective on life. I was seeing some stories. I'm going to put the link in the video description. I was seeing some stories of how Montessori was applied in some nursing homes where even maybe there were some cognitive challenges for some of the elderly there, but by focusing on what those the people could do, like okay, maybe they had mobility issues on one hand or the other hand, or sight and all that. The focus was now on what they could do. Okay, one hand is not working, the other hand is working. What can you do with that hand? And even there was another story of one of the residents of a place that during their morning reading, she was regularly disrupting it. Maybe she would. I'm not sure how the disruption was happening, but when they were now applying Montessori in that nursing home, the whole perspective changed. And then they said, okay, instead of trying to manage this person disrupting the morning reading time, they now put her in charge of the reading, and she was doing it so well, right? There's even another story that was shared about how Montessori for the elderly and for the children, where they were being paired together. And then the elderly were now teaching the younger ones, and then the younger ones are also. It was just, in fact, I was reading so many stories I can't even possibly share all of them, right? But the whole point is that when you understand the method, when you understand the goal, you can apply it anywhere. Another one I still came across just a few weeks ago was catechesis of the Good Shepherd. So now this one is a case of Montessori being applied in the church. Where now wherever you worship, you will realize that if you understand how Montessori works, you can also apply it in terms of passing your faith across to your children. So for this particular one, catechesis of the Good Shepherd, it was showing for the Catholic Church where children are being shown there, like there's a prepared adult, for teaching them about the mass and teaching them certain things. And then there's a prepared environment where they can get to play with things that they normally find on the altar. So like the chalice, the cup of wine, um, the priest, the vestments, and so on. In fact, I'm still going deeper into that, but it's just showing you how an understanding of this knowledge can be translated to basically any aspect of your life. So we've dealt a little bit on the third W because who it is meant for is very key. Because most times we just dismiss it as, oh, it's a private school thing. That is their thing. It's not for me, right? So, but when you get knowledge, when you get understanding of the method, you'll find that it can be applied to anybody, right? So we're going to be moving on to the fourth W, and the fourth W is when. So someone may ask, oh, let's say I'm doing a Montessori program. When will I may not have time for it. When can I even do it? And then I normally tell parents that you can apply this throughout your day. In fact, just recently I told somebody, you don't need extra time to implement Montessori at home. Basically, what it does for you is to help you to now structure that time you already have, right? You're already spending time with your children. You might as well get tips and tips and ideas on how best to make use of that time to teach them what you need to teach them in the shortest possible time. I say it over and over again. Most of my homeschooling, which is only part-time, it takes a few minutes, 5-10 minutes. I can't possibly do homeschool for an entire day, which I started realizing, right? Even if we spend the entire day together, there will probably be a lot more activity, like just playing outside or doing whatever it is, right? But the actual teaching is a few minutes, like 10, 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending on what it is. So when you can implement Montessori is anytime, any day, wherever, right? In early childhood, of course, you're helping to build the confidence of the child and their competence. I was going through my NAMC manuals, and I was just seeing a lot of things on how it can be very beneficial, to all ages, and whatever age, how to build confidence. We focus on trying not to overcorrect, make and a few mistakes and learn from those mistakes, control error, right? We also talk about even elementary school when they start getting familiar with culture and the community around them and asking questions: where are we, what are we doing, what's the goal of everything, right? And then secondary school, which is typically the 9 to 12 and 12 to 18 range, they start trying to make more contributions to their society. And then post-secondary, which is university typically, or graduate studies, they start building their competence based on the interest they've developed over time, right? So when we start working as well, you also begin to see different ways that you can apply it, right? Even if you're at work, you can apply Montessori there. um, Whatever stage you are in life, if you're in the working stage, if you're retired, there are so many options for you to apply. There's also many options for you to pass down your knowledge if you're retired, if you're in the older age group. If you're in the younger age group, even between, again, like I say, between siblings, right? The older sibling can help the younger one, and the younger one can help the older one, and vice versa, right? Depending on their strengths. And this is something that is typical in a Montessori environment. So that is for the fourth W. When can you apply it? So morning, afternoon, night. And then where, the fifth W is, where can you practice Montessori? Do you have to be in a private school? Of course, if you can do that, that is fine, with all the teachers and all the materials there at their disposal. But you can also do this very well at home. Like I always say, the schools are emulating the home. They are trying to recreate an ideal home for the children because they are dealing with multiple children. So, of course, you need some level of standardization to make it work and to coordinate things for them, right? So, but ultimately, where can you practice Montessori? At home, at school, indoors, outdoors, wherever you are, right? Again, when you learn about the principles of Montessori, like respecting the child, treating them as human beings on their own and not like half person or people that are not yet up to us in quotes. You can practice respect for the child anywhere you are, right? Whether you're at home or outside the home. In terms of the materials, like I normally say, it's not just about the materials. In fact, I believe that whether it's in a village or in a city, if you know what you need to do, you can implement Montessori. So that's why knowledge sometimes, or most times, is even more key than just buying one material after the other. To be honest, I know I was attracted by the materials myself, seeing all those beautiful shells. But the more I learned about it, the more I wanted to help other parents to know that it's not just about the materials, because as much as I was attracted by the materials, I was also somewhat put back by, oh, how am I going to buy all these materials? That's a lot, right? Maybe I should just look for a school where you can just put them. But even the schools are expensive, right? So you need to, focus more on starting from where you are and getting the knowledge. Knowledge is very, very key. So that's about the where. We've talked about the five W's already of Montessori, and then we're going to be looking at the H of Montessori, so which is how. So how do you go about it? Now you've learned all these things. Where do you start? How can you start? Tell us what to do ultimately, right? So I'll say two things which I've said over in multiple videos is the prepared adult and the prepared environment. It always, in fact, it almost always comes back to that. Um, the prepared adult is the person that is knowledgeable in Montessori method, in the Montessori approach, and the real fundamental of it, not just what we think it is. The Montessori name is not patented. You can have Montessori show up on any school. If you don't even know what you're looking for, you're going to put your child in a regular school that is just having the Montessori name, right? So that's, again, brings us back to knowledge, brings us to prepared environment. What are you looking for, right? So the prepared adult is someone that is familiar in those aspects and knows the goal of Montessori approach, the goal of education as a help to life, and not just education for grades or education for all the other different reasons that might be out there, right? The prepared adult is trained in observing their child. You become like one of think Jira is here that mentions she has become a detective, since joining our program. Being able to watch out and see what her children are interested in and then tailor things according to that. You, as a prepared adult, you learn to become a detective, a good observer, which is a very key skill, right? And then you also learn about the different subject areas. The truth is that sometimes I realize how much my child started doing this first, or my child. But the truth is that if you know that at a certain age they can actually learn something easily, you might as well teach them that thing. It's not too much for them, right? They're better off doing something valuable than just doing something random. Instead of giving them, for example, a flashy toy that is just making noise, if you know that they can start learning how to read a map at a certain age, would you not rather do that? Especially if it's just one a little extra effort here and there without so much change to your routine or to your family life. So when you know about the subject areas, like I share sometimes, we have we have language. So language, depending on the location where it is being implemented, right? So if you're in an English speaking place, the focus will be on the English language, but it can be applied to any language at all. We've started applying it also. We're learning Igbo at home. It's our native language. So we're also working on Igbo Montessori. You'll be hearing more about that in the coming weeks. We have a book that is coming out. You can apply it to Yoruba Montessori. You can apply it to French Montessori. That is why, again, the fundamental is key. When you know what we are talking about, you can apply it to anywhere and to anything to pass your message across, right? So we have the language subject area, we have mathematics, we have cognitive development, we also have motor skills, movement skills, we have social skills. All these are different subject areas. We have culture and science, and when I saw the culture and science curriculum, and I saw that there was history, there was geography, there was botany and zoology. I was wondering, for 0 to 6 year olds, which is this not too much? But then when you now see what is being taught, you realize that these subjects are really just at our fingertips. They're really just around us. It's not rocket science. Even when you talk about science and you see, oh, this thing floating and sinking, they are common concepts which most of us probably already understand. But we don't even realize it's a full subject on its own, and your child can begin to learn it if you're deliberately, of course, they might discover it on their own, but if you now know what you need to tell them, you can expose them to it, right? And you can build more topics, more discussion, and more conversations around it. So understanding the subject areas is very key. It's one of the things you learn, when you're doing our program that is for 12 months and covers all these subject areas. And some of them are repeated because they're just so robust, right? A prepared adult is also trained in the approach. Now, you might know the subject areas, you might know that, oh, 1 plus 1 is 2, but knowing the approach to teach your child, the specific child that you have, is another ball game altogether. If you have the knowledge but you don't have the skill to teach them, you don't have the right approach, you might just say, oh, this doesn't work. My own child is so different, like it doesn't work for them, right? Of course, some things need to be tailored to set to each child. However, if you know that, okay, teaching should not take a long time. You must not sit down hammering one thing after the other for one entire hour. Rather, maybe check what the child is already interested in and then use that interest to now build on how you now arrange the environment, make it orderly, not just orderly, but also in a way that when the into a space, they can focus on one particular thing at a time, right? If you put in too many things, too many materials, too many toys, they're just going to move from one thing to the other without picking as much as they would have picked if they had just 3 items. And it's not just having 3 items, but 3 items that are tailored to their need at that age. So knowing what they need at a particular age, these are some of the things you build when you join the program, that has this curriculum like a Montessori home education program. It also helps, the prepared environment helps to restore order and calm. Personally, I know I learned a lot. I used to think I was organized somewhat, but there were some things I just learned, and I realized that, if this is going to work with children, you have to find that helpful to the child, but it's also helpful to you, right? There's a lot you pick along the way. The prepared environment also allows the child to teach themselves. So I've shared a number of times how if I wanted my daughters to explore something, I'll just position the item in a particular place that they will see it, and before you know it, they'll start trying to play around with it, right? So the prepared environment is not just about the shelves. If you're familiar with Montessori pages, maybe Instagram and all that, you will know that there's a lot of beautiful things and you're just wondering and wishing when your house can just be like that, right? So the focus is not just on the materials, but more on the person, the prepared adult, and the child. Because when the adult is trained, when the adult is familiar with what they need to know, then they can work with what they have, to get what they need. I wanted to share some materials with us because I know I've talked a lot about how it's not just about the materials. I wanted to show us, like a practical example. So, for instance, here I have a handmade, yeah, the camera. Okay, so a handmade object sorting box, whatever you might call it. So it shows a triangle, circle, and square. And when I cut out, so this was just an empty packet of something, maybe a juice box or whatever it is. I tried to make it neat and tidy, sort of. So cut out these shapes, and then when I cut out the shapes, I wrap them up. So now I think our 2-year-old was, I made it with mind of the 2-year-old playing with it, but the 4-year-old was interested as well. So that's the benefit of different age groups, right? They teach themselves, they show their own interest, and they can match the shape. They can see that a square is not just something you draw on paper, but it's something you can actually hold, right? A tangible square, and it can fit this opening. In addition to that, you can now try passing through a three-dimensional object with a square base, and they can play with this for a while. So on its own, this is not a Montessori material per se, but it's something that is meeting a need, right? This other one, triangle-based prism, can pass through this side. So you don't need to have this, but you work with if you have something that has that particular shape, like this one now is Play-Doh, and it can fit in the circular portion. So they are seeing that all these shapes are things that are found in real life. It's not just something that needs to be learned in mathematics, and then you start talking about circumference of a circle or whatever it is. It can be learned even as a plaything, right? Another example I wanted to share was, I think it was the nail clipping. So this one. So this is just a tracing of my own hand, with an imaginary nail, and then a child can practice using a nail clip to clip these nails, and from there be able to trim their own nails. That was how we did with our older daughter. So she was just using nail clip, playing with this and just clipping it, and now she can clip her own nails. So the goal, of course, is not a race to who can clip their nails first, but the truth is that learning to clip your nails means it's less work for the parent. The child can do it happily and safely and will enjoy doing it, and they'll be proud of themselves, right? And that all just came from practicing clipping nails on paper. This is not, this is not, I don't know if this even counts as a material, right? This is just basically tracing my own hand with a pen. Now, for me to be able to do that is based on the training that I have, is based on the knowledge that I have, right? I didn't buy any material apart from a pen and paper. Another one I wanted to share with us, this is not a Montessori material per se. I know there's a similar one. One of the activities I did during my program, or I saw, was having a child just use a nail to hammer on a log of wood. So the log of wood is big with a wide surface area, and then there's a nail and a hammer, and the child can, of course, with supervision, just be tapping it in. There's a very big space, room to practice safely. And before you know it, they see that these things that adults are doing, they can do it also. They are capable. When they see that their capability, it helps to build their confidence. And confidence, we know, is something you cannot buy in the market, right? It's something that you have to build. It's something that comes with competence. When you know you can do certain things for yourself. So this one, I think my older daughter started using it. She's 4 now. She started using it around between ages of 2 and 3. And basically, there's a small screwdriver with supervision, of course. Don't just go and put a child in front of these things and say, we said so. And then she can practice screwing this in using a small spanner, right? Now, from playing with this, in quote, playing, she's now able to join me or join us when we're assembling simple materials. If I have to put a small table together or whatever it is that involves some screws, I can actually give her one, be screwing in this side and I'll screw in the other side. And you can imagine how proud she feels of herself that she can do this. It also means that while I'm doing that work, I don't have to send her off to go and watch screen just so that I can work uninterrupted, because I know in the process of assembling things and putting them together is better than any building toy you can have, any Lego that you're going to buy and worry that, oh, I don't have Legos. Meanwhile, every day in your house, you're assembling real life Legos that you have to deal with. Of course, Legos are great. Of course, building blocks. I love magnetic tiles. Those are very great toys and open-ended toys to have and to use. But my point is that if you already have the equivalent in real life of these things, you don't have to worry about the ones that you do not have, but what you have, right? So involve your children in what you are doing. Um, Make sure they can see you. Make sure they know that things don't happen by magic. If there's any key learning opportunity I want to emphasize, is the fact that when you do things with your children in front of them, it will just be a very big and free learning for them. One thing I wanted to share, one last thing was, if, for example, every time the children go out and maybe the house is scattered, or the room or kitchen or wherever it is, and then they come back and it's magically tidy, you might be surprised, but they might think there's just one fairy that comes and waves a magic wand, and everything becomes clean and shiny. But just having them even see you, like even before they start joining and participating, let them even see you actually picking those things up and seeing that, okay, this doesn't happen by magic. And most of the time they'll try to help, especially at an early age. But we may find that, oh, we're trying to push them off. No, you're going to just cause more work for me. I want to do this quickly. And most times you find that you're going to be doing it quickly for a long time, until you're going to now say, oh, and these children are of age to start doing this, and they're of age to start doing that. This is just so much work. You start getting frustrated, right? So now is the time to involve them in all these things, in everything they are involved with that we're doing in the house, outside the house. They are learning one subject or the other. They're learning mathematics, they're learning their language, they're learning all sorts of things, as long as we are trained, to teach them in the right way and to expose them to these things. So I think we're going to be wrapping up here. And, for now, I'm going to put all the links that I mentioned, for Montessori for the elderly, Montessori for catechism, and also a couple of other links. And of course, if you're interested in joining our program 2025, make sure you take advantage of the early bird bonus that is ongoing now. You don't want to miss it, because this is a 12 months program. And once it starts, we're not going to start taking people midway, because of course they're going to struggle with catching up on certain things. So make sure you don't miss it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask us. Check out our website. And of course, next week we have a special program, like I already started hinting us about Igbo Montessori and some other aspects of Montessori that we'll be going into. We have some books we are working on. Make sure you join in, and you're going to learn a lot about languages and a couple of other things. So if you have any questions, I look forward to seeing them. Otherwise, we will connect again next week at the same time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, everyone. All right. So I'll be signing off. I'll see you all in the WhatsApp community. If you're not there, make sure you join in. The link will also be available in the video description, and invite other people to watch this, share with them. Make sure you subscribe, and join us next week. Take care, everyone, and have a good day.